Even if you're a good player, you can just say, fuck it. It's not worth 14 days. It's not worth like 10 hours of games every day. It's fucking bullshit. I'm never going to do that again. Just a very quick disclaimer before we go into the intro in the video. I just want to say, again, as I usually do in my videos, that I personally do not think that I'm a good player. And I'm doing this video as a way of demonstrating my personal opinion on how or what you should be aware of in order to improve yourself. Okay, so before anyone goes like, Entropy thinks he's the best. No, I'm not. Okay, I think that's really arrogant to say. I think that's really hard and difficult to say. I have nothing to back that up at all. But what I can say is again, I will say in the introduction that I think everyone's insight is valuable. I think it's useful to consider other people's thoughts. And if you're interested in my thoughts, then keep watching, and I hope you enjoy. Hey yo, how's it going everyone? Entropy here, today with another video. Today's just going to be a brief or short-ish, how long my videos can be, discussion on what makes or what constitutes to a good player. And this is all opinion-based. All of my videos are opinion-based. Of course, I can't, avoid personal biases. Of course, I'm going to know certain clans better than other clans. And so a lot of these things, something to consider is that a lot of this thing, like the main takeaway I hope that everyone takes from my videos, or this video in particular, is it's insight. It's personal opinion. It's a thought, right? Whether you agree or disagree. I don't think you can agree 100%. I don't think you can, you can disagree 100%, but I think it's more meaningful to have a discussion of it. And, let me know down below. A lot of people, share a lot of thoughts, and I learn a lot from you guys as well, right? Like making some considerations that I might not even have considered before. I think that's a very important part of growing as an individual and growing as a player. So going back into the video, what constitutes to a good player in Vanguard Zero, in any game, chess, maybe? I think three main things to consider. Three main aspects is knowledge, mindset, and adaptability. Let's start with knowledge. What does knowledge mean? To know what's going on, right? So I guess, knowing how the game works is the very basics, right? If you don't even know how the game works, then are you even playing the game correctly? So you have to first constitute to a player is to know how the game works. And then it's about knowing the cards, right? Especially knowing your own deck, right? Okay, so knowing the clan. Okay, so for example, I'm playing Aquaforce. All right, what's Aquaforce's goal? What's the objective? Oh, the objective is to get multiple attacks in and then maybe plus out of it. Okay, so now you know the goal. Okay, now you need to know the cards, right? Okay, what does the cards text do? How do I achieve multiple attacks in turn to plus? All right, maybe there's Basil, maybe there's Diamantes. Oh, but there's other options like a Benedict, right? Lots of these little considerations to think about, and you need to know the card pool to be able to consider these. And then the next thing is synergies, right? Synergies, okay, so, this deck, maybe this card complements this card more, and maybe that's what makes the deck great. At the same time, it could be like, for example, this card has some pitfalls. Maybe it doesn't have enough draw power. Maybe this deck doesn't have enough draw power. How do I patch that up? Maybe should I play the on hit Kamasu draw one? Things like that, right? It's about synergy. It's about mitigating these flaws and finding a way to develop a proper deck. And then lastly, it's about, knowledge about what your opponent's playing or potential counterplays, right? Okay, if my opponent plays a deck that retires a lot, how do I hold on to my pieces? Do I play really aggressively early game? If my opponent is playing 9 crits, how do I counteract that? Do I play more intercepts earlier on? Do I stick to my winning image? Do I do this? Do I do that? Lots of this is about knowing the ins and outs of different matchups and different decks and different games. And I think that's definitely very important and a part of what makes you a good player. The next thing is mindset. Mindset's number 2. Why is mindset important? Mindset is important because, a lot of people, when they come into Cardfight Vanguard or TCG, or Zero, the one biggest bottleneck or barrier to entry is luck, right? If you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Or if you're playing Magic the Gathering, or if, you know, a pure game like chess, you don't have as much variance, you don't have as much luck, and it's not in the core or the soul of the game, right? Like, you know, if you play Hearthstone, if you play Vanguard, you know, triggers or RNG is kind of like an aspect of the game, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it also hinders or deters the perception of skill in the game. My question is, you know, yes, triggers swing the game like significantly, especially in Zero, because you know, you can't even guard against it or play around it in terms of defensively necessarily as much as the TCG. Is triggers being a factor in the game a definitive reason that Vanguard is not a game of skill? You know, you can still customize triggers, especially in Zero, you know, putting placement of triggers, whether I'm playing 9 crit, 9 draw, you know, why am I playing draw triggers in the first place? Why am I playing crits or stand triggers in the first place? Why do most deck plays 4 heals? That's very, very rudimentary, right? Why do we play 4 heals? But more so customizing the trigger lineup, you know, whether you agree or not, I think that part, you know, requires a degree of skill or personal playstyle. And that develops as you move into the game, right? Like, and it really depends to each their own, but being able to consider the way triggers interact with the game and being okay with you know, losing some games because triggers happen, being okay acknowledging that you know, wouldn't have won that game with triggers, I think is a very healthy part of growing as a player. You know, because at the end of the day, triggers are definitely going to be playing a role in the game unless you decide to throw away all the triggers. But then, you know, we wouldn't be playing Vanguard, right? And lastly, adaptability. Adaptability is important in terms of, you know, meta, in terms of what deck you're playing, and the way you're playing the game. I think everyone has their own playstyle and approach to the game that makes each individual's game different or you know, unique, and that's why it's okay to have different lists, right? One common thing that I've been hearing is, you know, Entropy's list, you know, I disagree with this, or maybe you should play less filter. And yes, I agree. It's like, for me, I always emphasize this, right? Personally, I value consistency, and that's why I play for filters, for Cynthia's in Aquaforce, for example. But that might not be the case. Maybe you value hitting numbers, and that's absolutely okay. Playing the 8K, you know, playing 7+3s as more early game aggression, these are tools that are definitely viable. And, you know, just because I'm playing for Cynthia's doesn't mean you have to. But what you can consider is, okay, why is he playing for Cynthia? Yeah, someone mentioned on Discord that, you know, you only have 2 actual spots on your board to play Cynthia because, you know, one of your columns is going to be your multi-attack option with Diamantes and Basil, and the only other spots you can play the Cynthia optimally is behind the Vanguard or on the other column. And the other column, generally, you want to hit numbers with it, especially if your opponent's playing cross-red decks, which is quite popular in this meta. And that's definitely true, right? It depends on what you see, right? If you're seeing a lot of Dungries, or if you're seeing a lot of Platinum easels, people riding on Platinum early, then maybe you're probably right to adapt to the meta and play 8K to help you hit 18K numbers, right? Definitely the case. And so being able to adapt to situations, you know, whether what deck you're seeing or adapting to, you know, a bad hand, you know, you still got to play the game. You're not going to instant concede, right? You still got to play it out. So I think those 3 aspects together are definitely, you know, important aspects of what contributes to being a good player. And so after all that, how do you measure being a good player, right? Because I can say, oh, I know enough about the game, you know, that's really easy to say, but that's a blanket statement, right? Or, you know, I know how to deal with triggers, you know, that's what I signed up for. Or I did consciously make choices in my deck building. This is why I'm playing or playtesting the deck. How do you measure that? How do you measure success? How do you measure a good player? And personally, I think there are two main ways of approaching it, especially in Vanguard Zero. The first way is ranked, right? People, in the purest form, people want to win on ladder, right? Of course, there are VP farmers, but you know, most likely or not than not, right now, you're going to be matched up with another person that's trying to win because they want their points and they want their rewards and they want their gems. So ladder is interesting because it's a game of semi-perfect information, or it's not perfect in a sense, because you know your list, but you don't know your opponent's list. You know what their clan is playing, but you don't know what specific cards they're teching in. You don't know specific trigger lineup. It's a lot of figuring out as you go. And is that more skill? You can argue so, because you have to consider how to play around your opponent. As a deck builder yourself, you can maybe tech out one sneaky crit and just hit it, and you can catch your opponent off guard, right? You can tech in different types of PGs, new and old, and your opponent might not expect it. Lots of different ways of playing in ranked that is different than other forms of play. And at the end of the day, you can say, oh yeah, as long as you have more than 50% win rate, you can, and all the time in the world, you can be super good at ladder. But there are two assumptions, right? Above 50% win rate, if you have a really poor, like 51% win rate, right? How long will it take? How many games will it take for you to get to Legend 10, Legend 20, Legend 30? How long? Right? If you have a 60% win rate, would you agree that you'll take less time to get to Legend 10, 20, 30? If you have a 70% win rate, would you agree that you take less time to get to Legend 10, 20, 30? You get an 80% win rate. Don't you think it's easier to get there? It's faster to get there? I agree. I mean, if you win more likely than you lose, then that means you win more games on average every day, and that means you will reach a greater rank, or more points, right? And here's the thing. Another assumption is infinite time, right? You can't assume that you have all the time in the world, right? Everyone has their own life. I mean, some people, maybe they're really focused on it, and that's I think it's all the power to them, right? Because it means that they're committed to it. It means they want it more than you. It means they're trying harder than you, right? Like if you're just I think something else more relevant to me as a university student would be comparing test grades, right? For example, if I got a 70% and the person next to me got an 80%, maybe they studied 10 hours, I studied 2. Will I say, oh yeah, you had all the time in the world and that's why you got 80%? It's a 10% difference, it doesn't matter to me. At the end of the day, the result is they got better than me. And if they put more effort, that's complimentary to them, right? That's a good thing for them to put in the effort to do that. Some people have work, some people have school, like myself, and it's difficult to manage time playing Vanguard Zero because of course you're burning out, and of course you have to deal with life and other things too. But if you're able to manage that time to achieve what you want to achieve, I think that's definitely more the power to them as well. So yeah, definitely won't say that it's the best way of measuring skill, but I think in terms of overall, like considering different factors, it could be a decent measure of how you approach the game. Secondly, tournament play. Tournament play is interesting, and it's the more go-to option for measurability of skill. And personally, I agree. I agree that tournament play is a better measure of skill. Here's the reason why. Because you are breaking down these assumptions that you have on ladder play, right? Perfect information is in play in most tournaments, as in you will know what your opponents submitted for their deck list. And if they deviate from them, then they're disqualified, or most of the time they are. What this means is during your play, you will know what your opponent teched, your opponent's options, and you can play around it. You know what your opponent expects from you as well, so you can consider that in terms of your play, your game. Secondly, is time, right? Last time for ladder, each season is 14 days. That's a lot of commitment, and not everyone can do it. Even if you're a good player, you can just say, fuck it. It's not worth 14 days. It's not worth like 10 hours of games every day. That's fucking bullshit. I'm never gonna do that again. In tournament play, it's generally less than a day. It's 1 day most of the time. You have multiple rounds a day. It's best of 3 as well, so you won't have that one random loss. You would have to have two losses against one opponent in order to lose that match. And as we increase the number of games, it's more relatable to skill because as you play one game. Maybe you can get lucky in that one game. You can argue that. In 10 games, maybe it's still 50-50 or 40-60, right? You can still say, oh yeah, I lost that 1 or 2 games with luck. But when you play 100 games and there's an obvious trend towards who's winning more and who's losing more, I think that should highlight a difference in skill. I think that could highlight a difference in skill. And, like some people could give flack for, oh, why are you using Uzume's list? He got 3rd place, right? Is that credible? I mean, you have to jump through a lot of hurdles to get to the championships first, and then to get 3rd place, right? So I think it's a decent. It's definitely more viable than using ranked as a measure. But I'm not going to disclose or give up on ranked, because I think it still has its merits. So yeah, overall, even if you're not interested in ranked or a tournament, or you're isolating, assuming there's no specific format you're talking about, it's just about winning, right? If you win more over a course of a lot of games, then generally speaking, you could be a good player, because you're playing better than the average Joe. Sorry, Joe, not meant to insult any Joes out there. But yeah, I think that's an opinion that I hold, and if you're just winning more, you should be a better player. Next, let's consider some other factors that could influence these aspects, right? Knowledge, mindset, and adaptability, and then measurability, rank and tournament play. First of all, it's meta dependent, right? For example, myself, I personally think that I performed better in for example, set 6 meta, than in the current meta. Why? Because my playstyle could perform worse against other, certain matchups. I have a difficult time changing my playstyle against Dungaree players, for example. I find, opponent having removal or crit options really threatening. And I personally have a harder time adapting to it. So yeah, my skill as a good player, or my perception of myself as a good player could go down. Like, I just win less in this meta. Does that make me a bad player? It's a scale, right? It's not a yes or no question. For example, in the set 6 meta, I really like playing Spike Brothers. I really like the choices that you could make, and Spike Brothers had better matchups in that meta. Does that influence whether or not I'm a good player? I mean, probably, because the deck I'm comfortable with, I'm knowledgeable about, and it's working better in that meta. And so, maybe I have low adaptability, but I have high knowledge in that meta, and so I'm performing better. It is meta dependent, is what I'm saying. Second thing is server dependent, right? Global versus JP. Global players could have a different approach than JP players. I'm not going to make any assumptions or statements because I don't play JP. But what I can say is global players can be affected by JP players, but less so the other way around, because JP is ahead of time, right? So for example, myself, I would look at different content creators, like Different Fight. I would look at what they've been talking about, what they've been playtesting, and that definitely 100% influences my perception of the game, right? Some things that I see is, for example, a lot of people playing Easel or Vermilion when they came out. That could, there's a lot of reasons why that could happen. Like, it's new, it's fun, it's a new mechanic, iconic units, especially it's one of the earlier sets from the TCG, because they released it differently in the TCG in the Japanese game and the English game. Lots of different factors in play right here. But one thing that I can see that can be argued is, what if people saw that Easel was top tier in JP because of the set 8 support, and that's why they want to play a lot of it right now? Or what if they saw that it's performed really well in the set 8 meta, and that's why they're playing a lot of it right now? Definitely could be an argument. And what I can say is that the meta is different in the servers, because there was more Gold Paladin than Vermilion, or from what I've seen and heard from other videos, there is more of these players in global when set 5 was released, when set 6 was released, than in JP. Back then, JP still had a lot of MLB and a lot of the ends and stuff like that running out in the wild. Right now, it's less so. I mean, you can't really compare it to right now because we're in a very different meta. But yeah, that's definitely something to consider, right? And lastly, objective. Objective as personally, as a free-to-play player, not investing any money into it, there are budgetary reasons that could influence whether you're a good player or not, right? If you're just determining winning as a metric, you can definitely still win with a budget deck, but of course, you're not going to be performing as optimally as an optimal deck. And that's something that you can consider, right? Just because you're a new player and you're not winning, maybe you have the skill, but you just don't have the pieces to compete with your opponent, right? Like you're at a deficit. Even before you start the game, you're losing. And it's more the power to you if you can take advantage of what you have right now that your opponent has and more, and still outplay them. I think that's definitely something to consider. Playing casually as well, just because you're a good player doesn't mean you want to play ranked or tournament, right? That's just something if you're invested in the game, or if you do enjoy these forms of playing, that's definitely something else, right? I know several people that are just casuals. They log in, they like the nostalgia, they like to play, and they're definitely great players, but they don't really find the need of grinding for ranked rewards because, first of all, they don't need the gems. They're willing to pay for the game. Second of all, the ranked rewards don't really matter to them. They're willing to pay for the game. And tournament play it takes a lot of time out of your day, and not a lot of people have the time for that, even for just one day. And so overall, I think at the end of the day, it's about, what makes a good player. It's about knowledge, mindset, adaptability. Know the game, mind how the game works, acknowledge and recognize your flaws and how the game works, as well as adapt to the meta, adapt to the player base, adapt to, the new sets. Measuring your skills through ranked and tournament, I think those are decent platforms for doing that. Ranked, you just log into your game, have internet connection first, or else you can't even log into the game in the first place, and then play, right? And then tournament play, you can definitely find a lot of that. I've shared a lot of links and platforms for that. You can definitely check out Facebook groups for tournaments. You can definitely check out Discord for MKWA. You can check out Juan Mango. They're definitely great platforms, and you can even discuss with people like, okay, I think I consider this play. What do you think? With the people you played against, and I definitely learned a lot of insight from these people as well. And lastly, you have to consider that nobody knows everything, right? A lot of these perspective or opinions or hot takes are meta dependent, server dependent, and objective dependent, and budgetarily different. And if you can recognize these things, I definitely think it definitely helps with how you approach the game, and could definitely help you find where you're at in terms of your skill in the game. So I guess that's it for this video. Let me know down below what you think about this discussion. What do you think about tournament play? I think this is something that I brought up when I was introducing the Juan Mango tournament. There are different formats, right? It's not just best of 3. There's 2-deck format. You bring 2 specific decks and you have to win with both. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? There's lots of room to consider. Is it a good thing to have deck lists submitted? In the TCG. In the TCG, you submit your deck list, but nobody really checks it until you get to top 8 or something. And definitely, I know there are cases where people, tech cards in because they've observed other games and know, oh, that guy's the Murakami player. Maybe I'll change this card. Nobody would really know because nobody actually tracks your deck list, right? So yeah, that's just my opinion. Agree, disagree. Let me know down below. Subscribe if you like my thoughts, and do all that stuff. Yeah. Bye.